Patricia Hartwell pressed two fingers against Dorothy's chest and pushed. Not hard, just enough to stop her. "Sweetheart." Her voice was honey over gravel. "I don't know who told a black woman in a $40 dress that she could walk through the front doors of Whitmore Manor on my daughter's wedding day, but they lied to you. The service entrance is around back." She smiled when she said it. That was the part people remembered afterward. Not the words, the smile. Dorothy didn't move, didn't flinch. Just stood there holding a wrapped gift against her chest, while 150 guests watched and said absolutely nothing. Then Patricia turned to a young black waiter nearby tray, trembling in his hands, and said, "Is this one of yours? Did catering send someone through the wrong door again?" The waiter stared at the floor. Then Courtney Voss laughed, and Patricia reached into her clutch and held out a $20 bill between two fingers like she was tipping a coat-check girl. "For the cab home, sweetheart." Dorothy looked at the money, looked at the room, looked at every face that looked away. She didn't take it. She straightened her coat and walked out like a woman who had absorbed this kind of cruelty before and survived every single time. What none of them knew was that they had just humiliated the most powerful person in that county. Stay with this one. Drop your location and local time in the comments. I want to know where you're watching from. And if you're not subscribed yet, this story is exactly why you should be. Dorothy Caldwell woke up at 5:47 a.m., not because of an alarm. She hadn't used an alarm clock in 11 years. Her body simply knew when the day required her to be present, and today of all days, it wasn't going to let her sleep past sunrise. She lay still for a moment in the gray morning light, staring at the ceiling of her bedroom in North Charleston. The house was small. 2 bedrooms, 1.5 bathrooms, a kitchen that smelled permanently of coffee and warm wood. The kind of house that didn't impress anyone who drove past it, but felt like a held breath the moment you stepped inside. Every corner of it had been earned. Every piece of furniture had a story. Nothing in it was accidental. She got up slowly, the way she always did, not because her body was failing her, but because Dorothy Caldwell had made a practice of moving through her mornings with intention. Rushing was for people who hadn't learned that the first hour of the day sets the temperature for everything that follows. She put the coffee on first. Always the coffee first. Then she stood at the window over the kitchen sink and looked out at her garden. October in South Carolina meant the hydrangeas were fading, their blooms gone papery and pale at the edges, but still holding on. She had planted them the year Nathan started middle school. They were taller than her now. She thought about that for a moment. Things you plant when your children are young, how they keep growing long after the children are gone. Nathan, her boy. Getting married today. She exhaled slowly and turned back to the counter. The dress was already hanging on the back of the bedroom door. Lavender knee-length, modest but pretty. She had found it 3 weeks ago at a Nordstrom rack in Columbia, $34 marked down from $89, barely worn. She'd had it dry cleaned twice and pressed it herself the night before with a damp cloth and a cool iron. It looked fine, better than fine, she thought. It looked like a mother who showed up with care. She showered, dressed, and sat at the vanity to put on her earrings. Small pearls perfectly matched, set in white gold. She put them on the same way every morning, left ear first, then right, without thinking about it. A gift from Governor Marshall Tate at her first inauguration 6 years ago. He'd said every mayor should have something that reminds them of the day the city chose them. She'd worn them every day since, not to impress anyone, just because they reminded her of what she was capable of. She looked at herself in the mirror for a long moment. 61 years old. Brown skin, fine lines, hair gone mostly silver and cut close to her head the way she'd worn it since her 40s. She looked exactly like what she was, a woman who had worked hard, raised a son alone, and arrived at this morning with nothing to apologize for. Be proud of that boy, Dot, she told her reflection. Whatever happens in there. On the kitchen table, the gift was already wrapped. She'd spent 2 evenings on it. Inside a quilt she'd sewn herself over the past 4 months, pieced together from squares of Nathan's childhood clothes, a strip of his first Little League jersey, a square from the flannel shirt he wore every Saturday in 7th grade, a piece of the blue hoodie he refused to throw away all through high school, soft worn, full of a life she had watched him build 1 year at a time. Beside it, a handwritten letter. 3 pages, front and back, on plain cream stationery. She'd written it 4 times before she got the words right. She tied the whole thing with a length of yellow ribbon, Nathan's favorite color, since he was 4 years old, and set it by the door. Her phone buzzed on the counter. She glanced at it. Sandra Okafor, City Hall. She let it go to voicemail. It buzzed again 30 seconds later. Same number. She picked it up this time. Sandra, Mayor, I'm sorry to call this early. The governor's office left 2 messages yesterday about the Riverside bill timeline, and the Gazette wants a comment before their noon deadline, and the infrastructure subcommittee moved their Tuesday meeting to Monday, which means... Sandra. Dorothy's voice was gentle but absolute. I hear you, and I will call you tomorrow morning first thing. But today I am not the mayor. Today I am Nathan's mother. Do you understand? A pause. Then, yes, ma'am, I understand. Enjoy the wedding. Dorothy hung up, slid the phone into her purse, and picked up the gift from beside the door. She didn't take her city-issued vehicle. Didn't call her driver. She opened the Uber app, requested a standard sedan, and waited on her front porch in the October morning air, gift in her lap, pearl earrings catching the early light. The driver arrived in 7 minutes. A young man, maybe 25, who glanced at her in the rearview mirror and said, "Special occasion." "My son's wedding," Dorothy said. He smiled. "Congratulations." "Thank you." She looked out the window as the car pulled away from the house. The hydrangeas caught the light one more time as they turned the corner. She watched them until they disappeared. She didn't know what was waiting for her at Whitmore Manor. She didn't know about the instructions Patricia Hartwell had quietly given the door coordinator 3 days earlier. She didn't know about the seating arrangement that had placed Nathan's entire family at a round table near the kitchen corridor, far from the head table, far from the Aldridge guests, far from any seat that mattered. She didn't know that Courtney Voss had already told 2 people at the Champagne station that Nathan's background was a little complicated, and left the word complicated doing all the work it was designed to do. Dorothy Caldwell arrived at Whitmore Manor at 11:23 a.m., carrying a handmade quilt, a 3-page letter, and not a single suspicion about what the next 40 minutes would cost her. She walked through the front doors with her head up, and everything that followed began the moment Patricia Hartwell looked across the lobby and saw her. Whitmore Manor had been built in 1887 by a cotton merchant named Elias Whitmore, who wanted everyone who drove past it to understand without being told that he had won. The building succeeded at this completely. 3 stories of white-painted brick wraparound porches on 2 levels, 6 white columns across the front facade, a private drive lined with magnolia trees, so old their roots had buckled the pavement in places. The grounds covered 4 acres. There was a fountain in the courtyard that had been featured in South Carolina Bride magazine twice in the last decade. The ballroom seated 200, though today's guest list was a carefully curated 150 Patricia's number, not Vivian's. The valets were parking Audis and BMWs and 1 actual Bentley when the first guests began arriving at 10 o'clock. By 11, the lobby was full of the particular kind of laughter that only happens when wealthy people gather in expensive rooms, easy, performative, the sound of people reminding each other that they belong here. Patricia Hartwell stood near the entrance to the main hall, with a glass of sparkling water she hadn't touched, watching everything with the focused attention of a general surveying a battlefield she had spent 9 months preparing. She was 63 years old and looked 55, which was not an accident. She had the posture of a woman who had been told she was impressive for so long that it had become structural, built into her spine. Her dress was dove gray, tailored expensive in the way that whispered rather than announced. Her hair was blonde, highlighted set. Her jewelry was real. Everything about her was designed to signal one thing: this family has standing. And today, of all days, that standing needed to be protected. Patricia had nothing against Nathan personally. She'd told Gerald this many times over the past 2 years, in the careful, measured tone she used when she wanted to sound reasonable. Nathan was polite. Nathan was hardworking. Nathan had a good job project management at a mid-size construction firm in Charleston, and he clearly adored Vivian, which counted for something. But Nathan came from North Charleston, which meant Nathan came from a world that Patricia had spent her entire adult life carefully separating herself from. And Nathan's mother, about whom Vivian had offered only the vaguest descriptions, was a piece of that world arriving today in the middle of everything Patricia had built. She had handled it the way she handled most problems. Quietly, in advance with precision. 3 days before the wedding, she had called the venue coordinator, a nervous young woman named Haley, and given specific instructions. The groom's family, his mother specifically, should be escorted to table 11, near the garden corridor. Lovely view. Table 11 was the furthest table from the head table, separated from the main seating arrangement by a decorative partition and a floral installation that blocked the sight line to the dance floor. A lovely view of the garden, yes, and nothing else. She had also quietly suggested to Vivian twice that perhaps a small wedding party, just the immediate inner circle, meant the ceremony itself could feel more intimate. Nathan's mother did not need to be involved in the processional. It wasn't a slight. It was just cleaner. Vivian had agreed. She usually agreed. Patricia had been her mother for 29 years, and Vivian had learned the way children of strong-willed women always learn that agreement was the path of least friction. What Vivian didn't know was the door instruction, the one Patricia had added as an afterthought, almost casually, at the end of the call with Haley. If anyone arrives who seems out of place, please use your discretion. We're maintaining a very specific atmosphere today. Haley had written it down without asking what it meant. She knew what it meant. Now the lobby was filling beautifully. The Aldridge family, old Charleston money, Gerald's longest business relationship, had arrived early and claimed seats near the front. The Belmont group was here, 3 couples from the country club, the women air-kissing Patricia and complimenting the flowers. The flowers were extraordinary white peonies and garden roses cascading from every surface. $14,000 worth of blooms that had been delivered in 3 refrigerated vans at 7 that morning. Courtney Voss arrived at 11:15 in a coral dress and immediately positioned herself at Patricia's elbow, which was her natural habitat. Courtney was Patricia's oldest friend and most reliable audience. She had the gift of making every cruel observation sound like simple common sense, which Patricia found invaluable. "Everything looks perfect," Courtney said, surveying the room with the proprietary satisfaction of someone who had helped plan nothing, but intended to take partial credit for all of it. "It does," Patricia agreed. "I saw the seating chart. Table 11 for his family. I thought it was best." Courtney nodded sagely. "The partition is a nice touch." They stood together for a moment, watching the room fill. Then Courtney said, not particularly quietly, to the woman on her other side, "Nathan's background is a little complicated. His mother as well. You'll see." She left the word complicated hanging in the air like smoke. And 2 minutes later, the front doors opened, and Dorothy Caldwell walked in carrying a yellow-ribboned gift, wearing a lavender dress and pearl earrings that nobody in the room recognized. Patricia saw her from across the lobby. She set down her sparkling water, and she walked. Dorothy had taken exactly 11 steps inside Whitmore Manor when Patricia reached her. She'd been counting without meaning to. Old habit. In 30 years of public life, she had learned to read rooms by measuring distance, how far people moved toward you, how quickly, what their bodies said before their mouths opened. 11 steps. The lobby was wide, the marble floor cool and pale as bone, and Patricia Hartwell crossed it like she owned it, which in every way that mattered today, she did. "Excuse me." Dorothy stopped. Patricia placed 2 fingers against Dorothy's collarbone and pushed. Not violently, not even forcefully, just enough to communicate with perfect clarity that she was not welcome to take another step forward. "Sweetheart." Patricia's voice was warm, almost kind, the way a temperature can feel warm right before it burns you. "I don't know who told a black woman in a $40 dress that she could walk through the front doors of Whitmore Manor on my daughter's wedding day, but they lied to you. The service entrance is around back." The string quartet was playing something soft in the corner. It kept playing for about 4 more seconds. Then the first violin stopped a half beat behind the others, and the music died in pieces. The lobby didn't go silent all at once. It went silent in waves, table by table, cluster by cluster, each pocket of conversation extinguishing as the words reached it, until the only sounds left were the fountain in the courtyard and the blood moving in Dorothy's ears. She stood still. She held the yellow-ribboned gift against her chest. She looked at Patricia's face, the small, satisfied smile, the 2 fingers still resting on her collarbone, and she felt something she had not felt in a very long time. Not anger. Something older than anger. Something that had been handed down to her by her mother and her mother's mother before that. The specific exhaustion of a black woman who has been made to feel like an interruption in a room that was built without her in mind. She had felt it before. She knew how to carry it. She didn't move the fingers off her chest. She didn't make a scene. She simply waited. Patricia turned to her left where a young black waiter stood holding a tray of champagne flutes. His eyes fixed on a point somewhere above everyone's heads, his jaw set with the particular tension of a person trying very hard to become invisible. "Is this one of yours?" Patricia asked him pleasantly. Did catering send someone through the wrong entrance again? The waiter's tray trembled once. He stared at the floor. He didn't answer. There was no answer he could give that wouldn't cost him something. Nobody else answered either. 150 guests, the cream of Ashford Hills society, the Aldridge family, and the Belmont group, and 3 tables of country club members, and not one of them said a word. Some looked away. Some found something urgent to examine in their champagne glasses. One woman near the bar put her hand briefly over her mouth, then lowered it, then looked somewhere else entirely. Courtney Voss laughed. It wasn't a quiet laugh. It wasn't a polite laugh. It was the laugh of a woman who had been waiting for permission and had just received it. She leaned toward the woman beside her, a Belmont wife in a yellow dress, and said at a volume designed to carry, "At least the help usually wears a uniform. This one didn't even get the memo." A ripple of laughter moved through the nearest cluster of guests. Not loud, not unanimous, but present. Audible. Real. And then Patricia opened her clutch. She reached inside with 2 fingers, the same 2 fingers she'd used to stop Dorothy at the door, and produced a $20 bill, crisp and flat, and held it out. "Here, sweetheart. For the cab home." The room went still in a different way after that. The kind of still that meant everyone present understood with complete clarity what they were witnessing and had collectively decided to let it happen. Dorothy looked at the $20 bill. She looked at Patricia's face. She looked at the 150 people watching her from the safety of their distance. She thought about Nathan upstairs, getting ready not knowing any of this was happening. She thought about the quilt in her arms, the letter she'd written 4 times to get the words right. She thought about the hydrangeas in her garden, going papery at the edges, but still holding on. She did not take the money. She looked at Patricia one last time. A long, quiet, level look, the kind that doesn't require words, because it says everything. Words cannot, and then she turned toward the door. Near the hallway that led to the bridal suite, a young woman in a rose gold bridesmaid dress had watched all of it without moving. Brianna Cross, Vivian's maid of honor. Nathan's childhood friend, the one person in the building today who had told Vivian 6 months ago plainly, and without softening it. I don't trust him. I mean Carter. I trust Nathan completely. It's his family I'd watch. She'd meant Patricia. She'd been right. Now Brianna stood very still, one hand inside her small clutch, and watched Dorothy walk toward the front door. She watched the young waiter stare at the floor. She watched Courtney Voss, still smiling. She watched 150 people look away from something they would spend the rest of the week pretending they hadn't seen. Her hand closed around her phone. She pressed record. Dorothy pushed through the heavy front doors. They swung shut behind her with a sound like a period at the end of a sentence. Outside, the October air was cool and clean, and completely indifferent to what had just happened. She sat down on a stone bench near the parking lot, the yellow-ribboned gift in her lap, and she was still. Not broken, not defeated. Just still. The way a storm is still at its center. Upstairs, Nathan was straightening his tie in the mirror when his phone buzzed on the dresser behind him. He didn't look at it right away. He looked at it on the second buzz. Then he read the text from Brianna, and his hands went completely quiet. The text from Brianna was 4 sentences long. Nathan read it once. Then he read it again, slower, the way you reread something when your brain refuses to process it on the first pass. Your mom just got thrown out. Patricia stopped her at the door, called her the help, in front of everyone. She's outside on the bench near the parking lot. That was 5 sentences. He counted them without meaning to. He set the phone down on the dresser. He looked at himself in the mirror. Black tuxedo, white pocket square tie he'd straightened 3 times already. He looked like a man about to get married. He looked like a man who had no idea what had been happening 40 feet below him while he stood up here adjusting his collar. He picked the phone back up and typed, "Don't let her leave." Then he walked out of the dressing room. The corridor outside was quiet, lined with framed photographs of previous Whitmore Manor events. Galas, charity dinners, weddings that had come before this one. He moved past all of them without seeing any of them. His dress shoes were loud on the hardwood, and he didn't try to soften the sound. He found Vivian in the bridal suite at the end of the hall. She was standing at the mirror in her wedding dress, ivory silk sweetheart neckline, her hair pinned up with small white flowers woven through it. She looked beautiful. She looked exactly the way she had described wanting to look on this day since they were first engaged 14 months ago. Her sister was adjusting the back of her veil. Her mother was not in the room. Nathan opened the door, and Vivian turned, startled. "Nathan, you're not supposed to. Where is your mother?" Something in his voice made Vivian's sister step back quietly and find somewhere else to be. Vivian looked at his face. "What happened? Where is your mother, Vivian?" "She was downstairs, Nathan, what?" "She threw my mother out." He said it flat and plain, no decoration on it. She stopped her at the front door, called her the help, offered her $20 for the cab home, and had her escorted outside, in front of 150 people. Vivian went very still. The room was absolutely quiet, except for the distant sound of the string quartet 2 floors below, playing something slow and romantic for guests who were drinking champagne and pretending they hadn't just watched a woman be humiliated in the lobby. I didn't, Vivian started, then stopped, then started again. I didn't know she was going to do that. Did you know she gave instructions to the door coordinator about who to let in? A pause. Too long. She mentioned something about maintaining the atmosphere. I didn't think she meant maintaining the atmosphere. Nathan repeated the phrase carefully, the way you repeat something to make sure you've heard it right. That's what your mother called my mother. An atmosphere problem. Vivian's eyes filled. That's not what I meant. That's not what I... You didn't stop it. The words landed quietly. No volume required. You knew your mother well enough to know what she was capable of, and you didn't make sure my mother was protected today. You didn't call her yourself this week to say, I've got you, come through the main entrance. I'll have someone waiting. You didn't do any of that. Vivian pressed her lips together. A tear moved down her cheek, slow and careful, not wanting to disturb the makeup. I kept the peace, she said softly. I always keep the peace. I know, Nathan said, and his voice for just a moment was more sad than angry. I know you do. He looked at her for a long moment, at the dress, the flowers in her hair, the room full of carefully arranged details that had taken 14 months to assemble. He thought about what it meant that all of this existed, and his mother was sitting on a bench in the parking lot. Then he turned and walked back down the corridor. He took the stairs to the ground floor, moved through the lobby without looking at anyone, and pushed through the front doors into the October air. He saw her immediately. She was sitting on a stone bench at the far edge of the parking lot, near a row of oak trees that were just beginning to turn. The yellow-ribboned gift was in her lap. Her hands were folded over it. Her back was straight. She was looking at the tree line like she was reading something written in the branches. She heard his footsteps on the gravel and turned. When she saw his face, the tuxedo, the tight jaw, the expression of a man who had just learned something that changed the shape of the day, she shook her head slowly. Don't, she said, don't make a scene on your wedding day for me. Mom, I mean it, Nathan. Go back inside. He sat down beside her on the bench instead. They were quiet for a moment. An Uber pulled into the lot, paused, then drove toward the entrance. A magnolia leaf fell from somewhere above them and drifted across the gravel. She offered you $20, Nathan said. Dorothy was quiet for a beat. She did. For the cab. Nathan stared at the parking lot. And nobody said anything. Nobody said anything. But he exhaled slowly. The kind of exhale that carries a lot of weight on the way out. Dorothy reached over and put her hand on his. Her hand was warm and steady. It was the hand that had packed his lunches and checked his homework and held his face when he was sick and clapped louder than anyone else at every single thing he had ever done. Baby, she said, I have been navigating rooms that didn't want me in them my entire life. This is not the first time, and it probably won't be the last. What matters to me, the only thing that matters, is that you know I came. You understand I showed up. I brought the quilt. I wrote the letter. I was here. Nathan looked at his mother's face. Her pearl earrings caught the light. His phone buzzed in his jacket pocket. He glanced at it. A number he didn't recognize. Then the name in the notification, Sandra Okafor, City Hall. He looked at his mother. Mom, why is the City Hall calling your phone? Dorothy didn't answer right away. She looked at the tree line again, and for the first time all morning something shifted in her expression. Not guilt. Not quite a smile either. Something that looked unmistakably like a decision being made. Nathan waited. He had learned this from his mother, the particular patience of sitting with a question and not filling the silence before the answer was ready. She had taught him this without ever naming it the way she taught him most things, by doing it consistently until it became part of how he moved through the world. So he waited. Dorothy looked at this tree line for another 5 seconds. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. The screen showed 4 missed calls, all from Sandra, one from a number labeled Governor Tate's office. She turned the phone so Nathan could see it. He read the names, read them again, looked at his mother. "Mom." His voice was careful. "What exactly do you do for the city?" Dorothy was quiet for a moment. Not evasive. Just choosing the right place to begin. "You know I work in public service," she said. "You told me you were a city administrator, budget and planning." "That's accurate. I do oversee budget and planning." "For which department?" She looked at him. "For all of them." The parking lot was quiet. A catering van idled near the service entrance on the far side of the building. Somewhere inside, the string quartet had started playing again. "Nathan," Dorothy said, and her voice shifted just slightly to the tone she used when she was about to say something she had been carrying for a long time. "I have been the mayor of Ashford Hills for 6 years. I was re-elected 2 years ago by the largest margin in the city's history. I run a municipal budget of $340 million. I have 12 department heads who report to me directly, and I have been working for the past 14 months on a piece of legislation called the Riverside Development Bill that will reshape land use and housing access across this entire county." Nathan did not speak. "I didn't tell you," she continued, "because I didn't want it to matter to you. I didn't want you introducing me to people and watching their faces change when they heard the title. I didn't want Vivian's family to welcome me because of what I represent, instead of who I am. I wanted to be loved as your mother, just your mother, and I wanted to know that the people in your life were capable of that." The silence between them was long and full. Nathan stared at the gravel. "The Riverside Bill," he said finally. "The one that's been in the news. The affordable housing project. That's yours. That's mine. The Hartwell family has real estate holdings in the Riverside corridor." Dorothy looked at him steadily. "They do." Nathan was quiet for another moment. Then he said, almost to himself, "She has no idea." "She does not." He turned to look at the venue, the white columns, the Magnolia Drive, the valets in black vests, the whole enormous machine of money and image that Patricia Hartwell had assembled to announce to the world that her family had won. And somewhere inside it, his mother had been handed a $20 bill and pointed toward the service entrance. His jaw tightened. Dorothy watched his face. "I know what you're thinking. I'm thinking she humiliated you in front of 150 people. She did. And she has no idea who she was talking to. She didn't ask. And that should matter. That should mean something." Dorothy was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "It matters because of how she treated a woman in a lavender dress who arrived carrying a gift, not because of any title I hold. You understand the difference?" Nathan looked at his mother. "I understand the difference," he said, "but I also think she should know." Dorothy held his gaze for a long moment. Something moved between them that didn't require words. The specific understanding that passes between a parent and a child who have been through enough together to communicate without speaking. She reached into her purse again. This time she pulled out a business card, plain white city seal, her name in clean black type. Mayor Eleanor Dorothy Caldwell, City of Ashford Hills, South Carolina. She held it for a moment. Then she dialed Sandra. "Sandra, I need you to come to Whitmore Manor. Bring the Riverside file and the Hartwell permit summary." A pause. "No, don't change. Come as you are." Another pause. 20 minutes is fine. She hung up, slid the phone back into her purse, looked at Nathan. We're going to walk back in together, she said. Not to make a scene, not to humiliate anyone, but because I came to watch my son get married, and I am not going to sit on a bench in a parking lot while that happens. Nathan stood up. He straightened his jacket. He held out his arm. Dorothy took it. They stood together for a moment, her in lavender, him in black pearl earrings catching the afternoon light, and Dorothy looked at the front entrance of Whitmore Manor, the way she looked at every room she was about to walk into, with patience, with preparation, with the absolute certainty of a woman who knew exactly what she was walking into and had decided to walk in anyway. Inside the venue, Patricia was holding court near the champagne tower, telling a story that made the Aldridge table laugh. She had smoothed the earlier unpleasantness into a wrinkle she'd already ironed flat. She was good at this. She had been good at it her whole life. She did not know that a black SUV with city plates had just turned onto the private drive. She did not know that the woman in the lavender dress was standing up from a parking lot bench and taking her son's arm. She did not know that in 18 minutes, everything in the room was going to rearrange itself around a name she had never thought to ask. Sandra Okafor arrived in 19 minutes. She pulled up in a black SUV with city plates, stepped out onto the gravel drive, and moved with the kind of purposeful efficiency that comes from 6 years of working alongside someone who does not waste motion. She was 38 years old, wore a charcoal blazer over a cream blouse, and carried a leather portfolio under one arm and a manila envelope in the other hand. She was not dressed for a wedding. She was dressed for a Tuesday, which was what this had been when she left her house that morning. She found Dorothy and Nathan at the edge of the parking lot. She looked at Dorothy's face, then at the venue, then back at Dorothy. "How bad?" she asked. "Manageable," Dorothy said. Sandra's expression said she doubted this, but was professionally obligated to accept it. Nathan looked at Sandra. Sandra looked at Nathan. "You didn't know," she said. It wasn't a question. "I didn't know," he confirmed. "Your mother is extraordinary," Sandra said simply. Then she turned to Dorothy. "Ready." Dorothy smoothed the front of her lavender dress, adjusted her pearl earrings once left then right, picked up the yellow-ribboned gift from the bench. "Ready," she said. The three of them walked toward the front entrance of Whitmore Manor. Nathan on Dorothy's left, Sandra on her right, the leather portfolio and manila envelope tucked under Sandra's arm, like instruments being carried into a procedure. The gravel shifted under their feet. The magnolia trees threw long shadows across the drive. Above the entrance, white peonies cascaded from iron brackets, $14,000 of flowers nodding in the October breeze. The door coordinator, Haley 26, still carrying the guilt of the instructions she had followed 2 hours ago, saw them coming and stepped aside without being asked. She didn't say anything. She couldn't find the words. She just opened the door and held it and kept her eyes down. They walked in. The lobby had settled into the comfortable hum of a wedding proceeding on schedule. Guests clustered near the champagne tower. The Aldridge table was deep in conversation. The string quartet was playing something slow and golden in the corner. White roses reflected in the marble floor. And then one by one, people began to notice. It started at the table nearest the entrance. A man in a charcoal suit, Thomas Aldridge, 61 years old, 4th generation Charleston real estate. A man who had attended 3 city council meetings in the past year, specifically about the Riverside Development Bill, looked up from his conversation and went completely still. His wife followed his gaze. Her hand stopped moving midway to her champagne glass. "Is that—" she started. "Don't," Thomas said quietly. But his eyes didn't move. The recognition moved through the room the way heat moves through water. Not all at once. in currents. Table by table, face by face, the slow detonation of a name that meant something to everyone in the room who had ever done business in Ashford Hills, which was most of them. Someone near the bar said it out loud first, a woman's voice not trying to be quiet. "That's Mayor Caldwell." And then it was everywhere. "That's Eleanor Caldwell, the mayor. She was on the cover of SC Today 2 months ago. The Riverside bill, that's her bill. She's been pushing it through committee all fall. What is she doing here? She's the groom's mother. She's Nathan's, oh God." Patricia Hartwell was standing near the champagne tower with Courtney Voss when the shift happened. She felt it before she understood it, the way the room's attention moved, the way conversations stopped, and heads turned, the way Thomas Aldridge stood up from his chair, which Thomas Aldridge did not do for most people. She turned. She saw Dorothy. She saw the SUV outside through the open door. She saw Sandra Okafor with the city portfolio. She saw Nathan walking beside his mother with his jaw set and his eyes straight ahead. And she saw the pearl earrings. Governor Tate had given those earrings to Mayor Caldwell at her first inauguration. Patricia knew this because she had attended that inauguration. She had shaken Dorothy's hand in a receiving line of 200 people and moved on in 4 seconds and forgotten the face completely, the way you forget faces in receiving lines, because you are not really looking. She was looking now. The color left Patricia Hartwell's face so completely and so quickly that Courtney Voss, standing 6 inches away, actually reached out and touched her arm. "Patricia, you've gone white." Patricia didn't respond. She couldn't. Her mouth had opened slightly. Her champagne glass was still in her hand, but her fingers had loosened around it, and it was tilting almost imperceptibly to the left. Dorothy walked to the center of the lobby and stopped. She didn't announce herself. She didn't raise her voice. She simply stood where she was with her son beside her and her aide behind her, and let the room do what rooms do when the truth walks in. Nathan looked at Patricia across the lobby. Patricia looked at Dorothy. The lobby looked at all 3 of them. Sandra stepped forward, opened the leather portfolio, removed a single document, and placed it on the nearest table with the quiet precision of someone who had done this before and would do it again. It was the agenda for the next Ashford Hills City Council session. Item 3, Riverside Development Bill, Final Committee Vote. Sponsor Mayor E.D. Caldwell. Item 4, Hartwell Properties Permit Review, Zoning Compliance Assessment Districts 4 and 7. Patricia's champagne glass hit the floor. It didn't shatter. It bounced once, spilling across the marble in a slow, spreading arc. Nobody moved to clean it up. Nobody moved at all. Dorothy looked at Patricia across the lobby. Her expression was not triumphant. It was not cruel. It was the expression of a woman who has been patient for a very long time and has simply finally run out of reasons to keep waiting. She spoke. Her voice was clear and steady and carried to every corner of the room, without effort, the way the voice of a woman who has addressed city councils and press conferences and community meetings for 6 years naturally carries. "I came here as a mother," she said. "I was treated as less than one. I want everyone in this room to remember what they saw today and what they chose to do about it." The silence that followed was the loudest thing anyone in that lobby had heard all year. The silence held for 4 full seconds. Then Patricia Hartwell moved. She crossed the lobby with the mechanical urgency of a woman whose entire life had just been reorganized by a single sentence, her heels clicking against the marble in a rhythm that had lost all its earlier confidence. The champagne spreading across the floor behind her caught the chandelier light as she walked through it, leaving faint footprints that nobody commented on. She stopped 6 feet from Dorothy, close enough to speak privately, too far away for it to look like anything other than what it was, a woman who had badly miscalculated and was now trying to find a way back from the edge. "Mayor Caldwell." Her voice had changed completely. The warmth was still there, but it had been recalibrated hurriedly, like a thermostat adjusted in an emergency. I had absolutely no idea. There has been a terrible misunderstanding at the door, and I want to assure you personally that it does not reflect Patricia. Dorothy said her name the way you set something heavy down, quietly. Finally, Patricia stopped. I know what happened at the door, Dorothy said. I was there. Of course. Of course you were. And I want to apologize sincerely and completely for the way you were received. The coordinator misunderstood my instructions, and I take full responsibility for. You gave her specific instructions about who to let in. Patricia's mouth closed. She didn't misunderstand anything, Dorothy continued. She did exactly what she was told. I know this because I've spent 6 years learning how institutions work. When people give instructions, they intend to deny later. The room had stopped pretending not to listen. 150 guests stood in the loose, frozen arrangement of people who understood they were witnessing something significant and had correctly assessed that movement would only draw attention to how long they had been silent. Thomas Aldridge had not sat back down. Gerald Hartwell appeared at the edge of the room, his face the color of old paper, and took in the tableau in front of him with the expression of a man watching a building he owns collapse in slow motion. Patricia tried again. Her voice dropped lower, more intimate, reaching for the register of women who understand each other. Mayor, I understand your frustration. I do, and I want to make this right. Whatever I can do, you can start, Dorothy said, by speaking to your son's mother the way you spoke to me an hour ago. With that same voice at that same volume in front of these same people. Patricia went still. Say it again, Dorothy said. What you said at the door. All of it. The part about the $40 dress. The part about the service entrance. The $20. She paused. Say it now. The lobby was so quiet, the fountain outside was audible. Patricia said nothing. She couldn't. The words that had come so easily an hour ago when Dorothy was just a woman in a lavender dress with no name that mattered had completely abandoned her. They required a specific kind of certainty to speak aloud, the certainty that there would be no consequence. That certainty was gone. That's what I thought, Dorothy said. She didn't say it unkindly. She said it the way you state a fact that needed stating. Gerald stepped forward, tie loosened, moving with the desperate energy of a man attempting damage control on a timeline that had already expired. Mayor Caldwell, Gerald Hartwell, I want to express my deepest. Mr. Hartwell. Sandra stepped smoothly to Dorothy's side. You have 2 permit applications currently under review with the city. Districts 4 and 7. The compliance assessment was scheduled for Q1 next year. She opened the portfolio. Given today's circumstances, the mayor has authorized an immediate preliminary review. We'll be in touch Monday morning. Gerald's mouth opened, closed, opened again. You can't just. It's standard procedure, Sandra said pleasantly. The review was always coming. We're simply moving the timeline. Courtney Voss, who had been standing near the bar since Patricia's glass hit the floor, made the decision to become invisible. She turned toward the wall, set her drink on the nearest surface, and began studying a floral arrangement with the intensity of someone who has never seen flowers before. It didn't help. Brianna Cross walked up behind her. Brianna was still holding her phone, had been holding it since the lobby, since the door, since the moment Patricia's voice had carried far enough to reach the hallway where she was standing. She stopped 12 inches from Courtney and said quietly and clearly, I recorded everything, from the beginning. Would you like to hear it? Courtney's hand, reaching for her drink, stopped moving. The part where you compared her to the catering staff, Brianna continued. The part where you laughed. All of it. I have very good audio. Courtney turned. Her face had gone the specific gray of someone whose world has just become significantly smaller. That was taken out of. I didn't edit anything, Brianna said. It's exactly what happened. In the order it happened. Then Vivian walked in. She came from the staircase still in her wedding dress, the cathedral train gathered in both hands. Her makeup was not perfect anymore. Her eyes were red. Her jaw was set in a way that her mother had never seen before, not in 29 years, because Vivian had spent 29 years setting her jaw in the opposite direction, toward accommodation, toward peace, toward the path of least friction. She walked past her father. She walked past her mother without looking at her. She walked straight to Dorothy and stopped. Mrs. Caldwell. Her voice was not steady, but it was clear. I should have made sure you were protected today. I knew what my mother was capable of, and I told myself it wouldn't come to that. I was wrong, and I'm sorry. Not because of who you are. She paused. Because of whose mother you are. Dorothy looked at this young woman in the ivory dress, tears moving carefully down her face, and felt something shift in her chest. Not forgiveness, it was too early for that, and Dorothy was too honest to perform it. But something adjacent. The recognition of a person who had just made a choice that cost her something real. She reached out and put one hand briefly on Vivian's arm. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Nathan stood in the doorway and watched his mother decide what grace looked like in practice. Brianna posted the video at 11:47 that night. She didn't add a caption. She didn't need one. Just the audio playing over a static image of the Whitmore Manor entrance, the white columns, the peonies, the marble steps, and Patricia's voice coming through clear and unhurried, and exactly as it had sounded in the moment. I don't know who told a black woman in a $40 dress that she could walk through the front doors of Whitmore Manor on my daughter's wedding day, but they lied to you. The service entrance is around back. Then Courtney's laugh. Then the part about the uniform. Then the sound of the $20 bill being offered, which Brianna had captured with unexpected clarity because she had been standing very close and the lobby had been very quiet. By midnight, it had 40,000 views. By 6 a.m., it had 800,000. By noon the following day, 3.4 million. Trending on every platform simultaneously with the particular viral momentum that only stories achieve when they manage to be both specific and universal, when they name something that a great number of people have felt but rarely seen documented so plainly. The comment section was not a debate. It was a verdict. Patricia Hartwell was identified within 3 hours of posting. It took that long only because her name wasn't spoken in the recording. Once someone connected the venue, the guest list, and the family name, it moved fast. Her LinkedIn profile, her junior league chairmanship, her membership at the Charleston Country Club, her charitable giving, her photograph at the Aldridge Foundation Gala 2 years ago, smiling wide, holding a check made out to a youth literacy organization. The internet laid it all out and drew its own conclusions. The mayor of Ashford Hills, someone wrote beneath one of the shares. She threw out the mayor of Ashford Hills, while wearing shoes that probably cost more than the mayor's entire outfit. That post alone was shared 400,000 times. The photograph that became the defining image of the story came from Nathan's phone. He had taken it without thinking, a reflex in the parking lot, before they went back inside, Dorothy sitting on the bench. Lavender dress, pearl earrings, yellow ribboned gift in her lap, looking at the tree line with an expression of absolute stillness. Someone found it in a quote tweet and captioned it. She ran an entire city and came to the wedding as just a mother. They saw a $40 dress. They missed everything. 11 million shares in 72 hours. On Monday morning, Gerald Hartwell called the city planning office 4 times. The calls were handled by a junior administrator who took detailed notes and passed them without comment to Sandra Okafor. Sandra brought them to Dorothy at 9 a.m. Dorothy read the notes, set them down, picked up her coffee. "Schedule the compliance review for Wednesday," she said. "Standard process. Full documentation required." "Yes, Mayor." "And Sandra, make sure it's thorough." "It will be." The compliance review proceeded exactly as described. 2 zoning violations were identified in the Hartwell Properties development portfolio, both in District 7, both involving setback requirements that had been flagged in an internal memo 18 months earlier and quietly set aside. The violations were not catastrophic. They were not fabricated. They were real, documented, and had been waiting patiently in a filing system for someone to look at them properly. 2 Hartwell construction projects were frozen pending remediation. The timeline for resolution was estimated at 14 to 18 months. Gerald Hartwell hired a lawyer on Tuesday. The lawyer called the city on Wednesday. Sandra handled it. The process, she explained, was entirely standard. The mayor had no personal involvement in the determination of violations. The findings would stand. Patricia issued a public apology on Thursday afternoon. It was 4 paragraphs long, drafted with the help of a crisis communications firm that charged $8,000 for the day and produced something that managed to apologize for the perception of her actions without once using the words "racist wrong" or "I was cruel to a woman who had done nothing to me." The internet received it the way the internet receives that particular kind of apology. "She apologized to the mayor," someone wrote. "She still hasn't apologized to the mother." That became the second headline. It trended for 2 days. Courtney Voss was removed from the board of a Charleston nonprofit arts organization on Friday. The board issued a 3-sentence statement referencing conduct incompatible with their organizational values. Courtney deleted her social media accounts the same afternoon. Her name continued to circulate anyway, attached permanently to the sound of her laugh in Brianna's recording, a laugh that had lasted approximately 2 seconds and would follow her indefinitely. Jordan Miles, the young black waiter who had stared at the floor while Patricia asked if Dorothy was one of his, gave one interview to a local Charleston podcast 3 weeks after the video went viral. He didn't use anyone's full name. He talked about what it feels like to be asked to be invisible, about the particular calculation a service worker makes in a moment like that, the job, the rent, the choice between dignity and survival. About the fact that he had looked at Dorothy's face in that moment and seen something he couldn't explain. She looked, he said, like she already knew how it was going to end, and she wasn't afraid of it. The clip from his interview was shared 2.1 million times. Inside Ashford Hills City Hall, the Riverside Development Bill passed its final committee vote 7-2 on a Wednesday afternoon in November. The bill allocated $47 million toward affordable housing development in the Riverside corridor, including parcels in Districts 4 and 7. The legislation was projected to create 340 new affordable units over 5 years and restructure zoning access for first-time homeowners in neighborhoods that had been systematically underserved for decades. Dorothy signed it at a small ceremony with 12 people present. No press conference, no speech. She wore the lavender dress. She wore the pearl earrings. She signed her full name, Mayor Eleanor Dorothy Caldwell, clear and unhurried the way she did everything. Afterward, Sandra brought her coffee, and they sat in the mayor's office looking out at the city for a few minutes without talking. "How do you feel?" Sandra asked. Dorothy considered the question seriously, the way she considered all questions. "Like a woman who did her job," she said. 6 months after the wedding that never happened, Dorothy Caldwell's morning routine had not changed in any meaningful way. She still woke before the alarm, still put the coffee on first, still stood at the kitchen window and looked at the hydrangeas which had survived the winter and were showing new growth at the tips. Pale green shoots pushing through the papery remains of last year's blooms. the way things do when you leave them alone and trust them. The house was the same. 2 bedrooms, the leaky faucet in the half-bath that a plumber had fixed in January, and that she still sometimes reached for the wrench to address out of habit. The framed photo of Nathan on the mantel had been joined by a second one. Nathan and Vivian's small ceremony, the backyard of this house. October light coming through the oak trees at the kind of angle that makes everything look like it was worth waiting for. 22 people. Nathan's side. Vivian's side. The sides blurred and rearranged into something that looked less like a partition and more like a room. Vivian had called Dorothy 2 weeks after the lobby, not to negotiate, not to manage perception. She had called to ask if she could come over and sit with her, just the two of them, no agenda. Dorothy had said yes and made coffee, and they had talked for 3 hours at the kitchen table while October light moved across the floor. Vivian talked about her mother, about growing up in the specific weather of a woman who made every room about what it looked like from the outside, about learning to smooth things over so early and so completely that she had forgotten somewhere along the way that she was allowed to disagree. Dorothy listened. She did not comfort too quickly or explain too much. She simply listened the way she had learned in 30 years of public service and one long, hard life, that listening was usually the thing people needed most and received the least. At the end of the 3 hours, Vivian said, "I don't know how to be different yet, but I want to be." Dorothy said, "That's enough to start." They had dinner together every other Thursday now. The same diner on Main Street where the waitress called Dorothy Hahn and didn't know her net worth or her title or the 11 million shares or any of it. Just a regular woman and her daughter-in-law, coffee going cold while they talked. Nathan had asked Dorothy once why she had never told him about the mayor's office. They were walking along the waterfront a Sunday in December, the harbor gray and quiet. "Because I wanted you to know," she said, "that a person's worth isn't in their title, and I couldn't teach you that if I led with mine." He was quiet for a while. "Were you ever going to tell me?" "When it mattered," she said. "It mattered that day." He nodded. They kept walking. Patricia Hartwell did not attend her daughter's wedding. She was not invited. This had not been a difficult decision for Vivian, which told Vivian something important about herself that she was still working through. Patricia had moved through the subsequent months in a world that had become noticeably smaller. The Junior League had not removed her. They didn't do things like that directly, but she had stopped attending meetings in February, and nobody had called to ask why. The Charleston Country Club remained technically available to her, but Gerald had stopped going, and she found she didn't want to go alone and be the woman in the room that everyone was quietly thinking about. She had not reached out to Dorothy again after the public apology. Dorothy had not expected her to. Gerald Hartwell had resolved the zoning violations by March. It had cost $340,000 in remediation and engineering assessments, and the 18-month delay on 2 development projects had produced losses that his accountant declined to characterize as anything other than significant. He had not spoken publicly about any of it. Courtney Voss had relocated to Atlanta. This was described in the one mutual acquaintance who mentioned it as a fresh start. The 2 seconds of laughter in Brianna's recording remained attached to her name on the internet, with the permanence of things that are true. Brianna Cross had been offered a position at a Charleston media organization on the strength of her instinct and her recording. She declined politely and went back to her job in nonprofit communications, where she continued to be exactly the kind of person who puts their hand in their purse when something wrong is happening and doesn't look away. Jordan Miles, the waiter, had enrolled in a hospitality management program in January. His interview clip was seen by a scholarship administrator at the College of Charleston, who reached out through the podcast that had hosted him. He started in the fall semester with full funding. The Riverside Development Bill broke ground on its first project in April. A mixed-income housing complex in District 748 units a community garden on the south side, a small library reading room on the ground floor that Dorothy had insisted on and that the architects had initially pushed back on for budget reasons. And that was now the feature of every press photograph of the development. Dorothy attended the groundbreaking in the lavender dress. Someone from the Gazette asked her afterward if she wanted to make a statement about the events of the previous October, the wedding, the lobby, the video, all of it. She thought about it for a moment. "I came that day as a mother," she said. "I was treated as less than one. And then I went back inside and did my job." She paused. "That's the whole story." The reporter waited pen on paper in case there was more. There wasn't. Dorothy thanked her, put on her sunglasses, and walked back to her car. The hydrangeas were blooming by the time she got home. Dorothy Caldwell never raised her voice, never demanded to be recognized. She simply walked back through the door she had been pushed out of and stood in the truth of who she was. The most dangerous thing you can do to a person of dignity is mistake their quietness for weakness. Because some people don't need to announce themselves. They just need to show up, and the room rearranges itself around them. If this story stayed with you, drop a comment. Tell me where you're watching from and tell me about a time someone underestimated you. I read every single one. And if you're not subscribed yet, you already know what to do. Stories like this are why this channel exists.